All right, so your homework was to go ahead and actually make a level. So I've gone and made a small one. Hopefully yours is a little bit bigger. We use the arrow keys to move, spacebar to jump, and we are going to have to work on those angles. We notice as we run off of the screen, it doesn't follow us. So we're going to fix that first. So what we want to do is add a camera to our player. And there's a couple ways we can do it. We can actually add it here in the main view, just as a child. But in this case, I'm actually going to go into the player scene and make it a child of the player here. And I'm just going to look for camera 2D. And we'll add it here. If I zoom out, we can see what it shows on the screen. Now, I like it to be part of the player, as opposed just to be something as a child of the player. And I already know there's one thing I want to change right off the bat. If we come back into our main level here, I'll do a quick save to save off the player one. And I run this. Right now, the camera shows equally just as much underneath me as there is above me. And we can see that the camera itself is going to follow me now. I can go all the way to the end of my level, very short level. But I want it to show more above me than it does below me. And I can do that just by coming into player. Make sure I have the camera selected. I'm going to go to the move tool. And I'm just going to grab it, move it up a bit. Likewise, if you want it more to one side or the other, we can move this here on the X as well. For now, I don't want to. I will have a bit of a float to the camera, but we'll create that camera script later. So I'll just save this off and let's come back into main. We'll take one more quick look at it and then we're going to make our first enemy. There we go. So we have much more above us than we do below us. So this first enemy we're going to make, I'm going to have him just bounce up and down. And I'm going to use what's called a tween. So let's create a new level. I'm going to make this a 2D scene. I'm going to call this, let's call it a bouncing enemy. And it just dawned on me, I made this a no 2D. I make this mistake a lot. I'm going to go straight to making it an area 2D. And because it's an area 2D, I need two things on it. One is a collision shape, 2D, and the other is a sprite. And for this one, I'm just going to make a sprite 2D. We can load up animated sprites later. You know what? Let's at least set it up to be an animated sprite. So again, bouncing enemy, click animated sprite, 2D. And I like my animated sprite above the collision. And with the animated sprite selected, I'm going to open up the animation. We have to make a new sprite frames. I'll open this up and let's go find an enemy. So let's close players. I'm going to come up, enemies. And we've got a few here. This is something that's just going to bounce up and down. So I probably don't want anything like a barnacle. I think we have some saw blades in this one. Yes, we do. So how about the full saw blade? We have saw blade. If we take a look here where the blades are, we have one that's moved. And if we look at that, the blades are in a slightly different position. Then with dead, the eyes are different. For now, I'm just going to take the regular saw. And I'll just drag and drop it over here. Zoom in. Come down to my collision shape 2D. And it looks like we need a circle here. And we need it bigger. I like to scale uniformly. So I'll just go out here. And instead of doing position, let's do scale. And we'll make sure they're locked. So it's the same on both directions. And depends on how much of the teeth you want to include in here. I'm going to get really close to being precise. That's good. I'll save this off. I need to save it into a scene, which I'm just going to call bouncing enemy. I'll save it. And I guess we can make it move first. So let's add a script to the bouncing enemy. So we'll select the root node, hit plus. It's going to be called bouncing enemy. I don't want it in scenes though. So we're going to move this to the scripts folder. Now, because I was in scripts before, it shows here for the recent folders. For some reason it doesn't. Since we're in scenes, we can go up and select scripts. Likewise, if you're in scenes and you want to get to scripts and you've been there before, you can just select this and I'll bring you right there. I'll go ahead and save this. I'll create and I'll make it bigger. Okay, so I want to set this tween up and I want to tween over a certain distance. So I'm going to get rid of, well, I'm not going to need process. I know that. I probably will use ready later, but let's create a new function here. And I'm just going to call this function, well, actually, I guess technically we don't need a function. We can just grab it right from ready. So let's create a tween, which I will just call tween. It's going to be equal to create tween. So this will create a brand new tween as soon as this is added to our scene level. Then what I want to do is say tween dot tween property. So we're going to take one of the properties of this object and we're going to tween it. So we're going to go from one to the other. And the object we want will be our self. And then the property we want, I'm just going to take position. I'll put a comma. Now I know I want to, at least at the start, just go up and down. So I'll say vector2 dot up. Remember to use that autocomplete. Cuts down on the typos. And let's modify this by some number. I'll hit comma and then some time. Let's do 1 second for now. So if I were to save this, come back into my main scene. I want 2D. I'm going to select the main. Let's add in that bouncing enemy. And I'm going to move it right about here. He's going to be really close. Oh, let me just check first. I have it moving 50, I believe, right? Yeah. So keep in mind for vector 2, when we're moving, essentially we're saying up and down. So this is just the Y. Remember that going down is actually positive. So if we come in, I'm going to run this. It'll build out. And the blade completely went where we didn't expect it to go. It ended up over here. So I'm actually going to take my player. Let's move him down quite a bit more. Almost to the ground. I'm going to take my bouncing enemy. Let's move this down. Let's run one more time. And we can see our blade is moving diagonal. We don't want that. We want straight up and down. Let's jump back into our script. So we're going to take a look at a property called as relative. And what this means is instead of moving to this position, I want to move this much away from where I currently am. So in this case, this is how it makes us move up 50 pixels. So now if I go and run it, we can see over the course of 1 second, it moves 50 pixels. We probably want a little bit more. So let's do, I don't know, 150 pixels. It's going to be different depending on your level, how you have it designed. There we go. Over the course of 100, or over the course of 1 second, it moves 150 pixels. I'm going to increase it a bit more. Then I also want it to come back down. So I can take this property that I've tween it again. And then there's two ways I could do it. I can multiply it by negative 250. I can also say, hey, I want to go down by 250. Let's run this one. And it goes up, it comes down, and it stops. I want it to keep going. And tweens have a ton of properties that we can work with. The one that makes it keep going over and over again is set loop. So I like to come above where the actual property is being tweened. And I'm going to come in and say, hey, grab me that tween. And I want to set loops. And then I'm going to set it to -1. So that will loop forever. We'll run it one more time. And now we can see it just bounces up and down. It's very linear. It's the same speed until it reaches the top. Then it's the same speed going down. I want to add kind of like a slowing down effect as it gets to the top. And same as when we get to the bottom. Now we can control that through transitions. Now we're starting to add a lot of magic numbers down here. So what I'm going to do is come up to the top here. Since I know I'm going to have a lot of these blades throughout multiple levels, I want them all to be able to have the ability to be different, at least have different properties. So I'm going to export all these properties so they show up inside of our inspector for our bouncing blade, and they can all individually be changed. So let's start off. I'm going to say export a variable, which I will call distance. This is going to be of type int because you can't move half a pixel. And I am going to start off with that 250 that I have down here. Then all I have to do is take this distance, replace the 250 with it. Let me shrink this down so we can see it a bit better. I'm actually going to full screen this just so you can see it a bit better. Before I do that though, since I've saved it and I have the bouncing enemy exposed, we can see this new property we made, distance here. Let's do one more. we'll do the time next. So var time. Now this can be a float because we can have half of a second. But right now I have it set to 1 second. And of course it shows up over here. So I'm going to make this bigger. That variable we just made time, I'm going to replace my 1 with it. There we go. The last one I'm going to add up here is this transition type we want. So I'm going to call this transition. And this is of type tween dot transition type. Now I'll save this one off and let's come and take a look here. So I'll make sure it's not full screen. And we have quite a few of them here. Anyone who's ever worked with tweens probably knows what all of these are. If you don't know what they are, they do have some images online. I actually like this one better. If I go and make this full screen, here's what these transitions look like. So linear, not perfect. I'm not sure. It should be straight from one corner to the other. But this shows that where it starts at and where it goes at, it moves the same speed no matter where it is along this transition. Then we have the transition of sine. So it kind of eases in, then goes up. And I'll leave it to you to look at the rest. I think the one I want is going to be trans circle. Again, you can play with these as you wish to find the one you want. Stuff like elastic and bounce can make it pretty crazy. But go ahead, Google that out and take a look at it. So how do we set up this transition? I'm going to come up here. We're just going to go to the tween dot set trans all the way down here near the bottom. Then I'll pass in the transition that I have selected. By default, it selects linear. So let's go take a look. Linear is the exact same as what we're used to. It just goes up and down. I'm going to stop it. Let's switch it to, I think it was the circle I was looking at. I'll start it back up. There we go. So we see how it's kind of slow and then kind of jerky. That might be a little bit too much. So I'm going to go with something maybe like sine. This will give it a nice, smooth, even, a little less jerky. There we go. That's what I want. But go ahead, play around with them. See which one you like. The great thing is now all of them can be different. The last thing I want to play with here is how I apply these. For now, I'm just going to set it to be easing in and out. And this is known as setting the ease. So I'm going to say tween dot, and then we have a lot of them here too. I'm just going to say in and out. So it affects it when it comes in and out. We could do out and in, but I'll do in and out. I'll save this off, and that's pretty much it to get the tweening working. But I want it to be able to affect the player when the player moves into it. Now take note, the blade is above the player. We'll take a look at that a little bit later on. But I'm going to stop this. I want it to be able to kill the player when it touches them. And the way I'm going to do that is I'll come into the player script itself. I'm going to create a new function in here. So func, I'm going to call it game over. We're not going to return anything. And all I wanted to do is say get tree dot reload current scene. Now we are going to have to make a modification to this after, but I am going to save it for now. I want to come back over to my inspector with the player selected. And remember the collisions when we set him up? We said he could interact with the one, and did we not set it to be interact with the ground? Really? Let's come back in and take a look at my ground. Did I not save this? I have the ground interacting with it. But the main thing I'm looking at is I wanted to be able to interact with enemies next. So we'll come back into the player scene. I'll select the player. I'm going to say 1 and 3. He's actually on layer 2. I'm sorry, he's layer 1. Ground is layer 2. We'll save that off so we can now interact with enemies. So I'm going to come into my bouncing blade. I want to make sure it's the exact same thing here. So we have to come into collision. I'm going to put it on layer 3. It interacts with layer 1. I don't need it interacting with the ground. And I want to check the ground one more time. Okay. So I'm going to select the enemy and I want to detect when it overlaps with the player. So if I come into the nodes, I can take a look at to see when some other area has entered our area. So if I take a look here, I have this big blue area. This is our collision shape. Anytime something else with a collision shape, or I guess specifically an area 2D, comes into our area, I want to be notified. So I'm going to select this area entered. And if I double click it, it'll allow me to make an event somewhere. But I don't want it on this script. What I want to do is call that function we made called game over on the player. In order for that to work, I have to come over to the main scene, take my bouncing enemy here, double click this area entered. Come on, there we go. And then I have access to the player now. So I'm going to select the player. If we hit pick, I'm going to turn off compatible methods. And did I select the player? I am on player. I thought it'd show up here. It doesn't. Okay, well, we're going to make sure that it makes it the way we need it. I'm just going to call it game over. It'll make the method for me. So I'll create, come down here, and we have game over, and take note that I'm taking in an area 2D now. I don't actually need to save this area 2D. I'm not going to do anything with it. Well, let's save that off. And what script did I put? I'll put my game over in the wrong script. Gee, I wonder why I couldn't find it. I'm going to copy that line out, delete that, come back into player, and where we say pass, I'll put that there. There we go. Now when the player gets hit, the level should reload. So I'm just going to start it back up. And I guess we should have put our player up a little higher, but when I get hit now, it's still not working. Let's just make sure our player and everything else are on the right level. So player is supposed to be layer 1. He does interact with layer 3. Our bouncing enemy should be on layer, he is on layer 3. He interacts with layer 1. Come into my player, and here's where I messed up. My player is not an area. He is a character body 2D. So that means I have to come back into the main, select the bouncing enemy. I need a different method here. So I'm going to undo this one. We'll disconnect it. And what I want is body entered. I still want to connect to the player, and I'm still going to call it game over. It'll just overwrite the other one. I'll save it. I'll come back in, and we'll just make some adjustments to the game over. So we'll make sure that it's coming from node 2D instead of area 2D. And now when it hits us, it'll kill us, but we are going to get this one error. So I'll move in. It's not going to crash our game. It's still going to reset us every time it kills us. But if we stop it and we take a look here, when it calls game over, so it's removing collision objects during the physics callback. So essentially we want to make it wait before it reloads the scene. And we do that by calling it deferred. And that's going to make it wait till the physics callback is done. Then I'll go ahead and remove it. And I can do that by saying get tree. There's a few different ways we can do this. This is the way I'm going to do it. So get tree dot call deferred. Then that deferred call we want will be reload current scene. And we'll get rid of the rest. I'll clear this. Let's run it. And everything should be good. So it kills us. It starts us over. We can instantiate a lot of them. I'm just going to make 2 more. Come into the main scene. I'm just going to move this one. Let's move it here. And if I come back into the inspector, I'm going to make this one really short and fast. And of course, we could expose other variables here. Maybe we want it to go up more than we want it to go down. Or better yet, for a challenge, make one that goes left and right through tweening. And this one here, I'll do 100. And I'll put that one here. And I'm going to move it down just a bit. And now when I start it up, I've got 3 of the exact same bouncing blades, but they're all different. And I guess I technically could come in and change their tween sign or their tween types. Let's do bounce on this one. And on this other one, just to make it different, let's do an elastic, and let's make it over 2 seconds. Start it up. And now all 3 of them really look different. So go ahead, scatter a few of these throughout your level. And again, no matter which one I hit, it will restart me. I'm probably going to have to jump to hit this one. There we go. All right, there we go. We got our first mob. That's all I'm going to do for this video. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.